The fourth way delineates several different brains, or what are called centers, in the human being. They are the instinctive moving center, which is essentially the body and the bodily functions and all the bodily movements, and the emotional function or emotional center, which is the realm of our feelings and emotions, and the intellectual center, the realm of all of our thoughts, attitudes, how we articulate with words, form mental concepts, and so on. Of particular interest is what is called the emotional center, because it's assumed in most cases, or in many cases, that by means of this emotional center, we perceive the world and we feel the world emotionally. This is true only in a very limited extent. And the reason is that most of the emotions we feel as human beings are not perceptions, they are reactions. We perceive and we instantaneously react, usually with a feeling of like or dislike, a feeling of approval or disapproval, a feeling of taking an interest, particularly an interest in a person or in an event, or lack of interest and or opposition to interest. In other words, we can have a positive emotional reaction or a negative emotional reaction. And in this case, it doesn't mean positive is happy, negative is sad or angry. It means positive in the sense of drawn to a positive energy, a positive attunement to something, and negative meaning just negative polarity as opposed to positive polarity. But these are not emotional perceptions as such. For the human emotional center to perceive, to be an instrument of perception, an organ of perception, is very different. And it requires a certain degree of conscious awareness, of being consciously present and aware. And by means of this, then, perceptions are made from the consciousness in us. And then they reflect in our emotional center. And the emotional center then can become an organ of digestion for our perceptions. And it's an emotional organ of digestion, just as our body, our physiology, our digestive system, our lungs and our stomach, and so on, just as they become an organ of digestion for physical food, the emotional center can become an organ of digestion for emotional food. And emotional food in this case refers to people. It also refers to beauty, to nature, to many of the impressions that are brought to us by light and the reflection of light that come in through the eyes. Yes, we can respond emotionally through our ears and through our senses to a degree, but the eyes play a critical role in this, in our capacity to perceive and digest. This is the key word, digest. Another way to say all of this is that our emotional centers normally do not digest impressions. We react, and it is as though light is bouncing off the mirror and bouncing back. We're just reacting. We're not truly digesting. For this to happen, we have to be present, consciously present, and we have to remain consciously present. And this is something that the fourth way puts emphasis on, this idea of impressions and consciously receiving impressions. And this is one of the aspects of what is referred to in the fourth way as self-remembering, which means consciousness knowingly being conscious as itself. You know you're standing here or sitting here, consciously looking around, seeing the external world, and you're now receiving all these impressions. You're not just reacting to them. They don't just come to you and hit you, so to say, and then bounce away. Rather, you are letting them enter. They're now coming into you, just as the way air comes into the lungs or food comes into the stomach. These impressions are now coming in more consciously. This makes a tremendous difference in our experience. And now the emotional center starts to operate in a different way, at a higher level of itself. And these emotional perceptions digested in this way can start to affect the way we realize ourselves as human beings living life on planet Earth with other human beings. Can be a powerful, deepening sense of realization about being alive and what it means to be conscious as a human being. This is also why the fourth way puts so much emphasis on the area of negative emotions, because negative emotions are precisely what corrupt our emotional center and prevent our emotional center from operating in the way that I've just described. We are so accustomed to responding to things, to people, to events, to news with a negative emotional attitude, a negative emotional response, a negative emotional reaction that can be visceral. There's much more to this topic of negative emotions. It's a complex area because it doesn't involve just the emotional center. It involves the other centers, the instinctive moving centers, and the intellectual center. There's a compilation that happens, but it's so fast, yet the catalyst for it all sort of coming together is the emotional center. This is the emotional center rejecting, often, impressions, events, other people, as opposed to digesting them. And this can mean something can even be unpleasant, but rather than reacting in an emotionally negative way, we're able to digest it. And the emotional center plays a big role in this capacity to digest what happens. And in doing so, the emotional center can become an engine of transformation for consciousness.